Welcome to the Be Here Now Guest Podcast. This series features a collection of teachings and conversations centered around mindfulness, spiritual growth, and living a life in balance. Each week, our diverse network of guest teachers and hosts offer up wisdom and practices from a different spiritual path and perspective. If you would like to support this podcast, please visit BeHereNowNetwork.com/donate.
There are three levels of existence. The first is physical, which we don't need to describe. We kind of understand it. We experience it through our senses. The second level is quantum, which is the world of information and energy that we use in our technology today when we send emails and talk to each other on cell phones and surf the information highway on the internet. But then there's a third level that scientists are discovering, which they these days refer to as the non-local domain. And the non-local domain is in the discontinuity. We said that everything is a vibration, so every vibration has an on and an off. So the non-local domain, the window to the non-local domain, the corridor, the transformational vortex to it, is the off. It's the space between every two ons. In our consciousness, it's the space between our thoughts. So between every thought, we have a little space. And that space is the window. But it's also the same space between everything else. So if one goes beyond our mental activity, and one goes to a place which is the same behind all the intelligent activity of the universe. The domains that we call non-local, which is beyond your personal mental activity, is also the domain of existence, which is behind all the intelligent activity of the whole universe. And this is immortal, it's beyond birth and death, it's infinitely correlated, which means everything is synchronized with everything else, it's silent, it's eternal. There's no time here, even though it's the source of all time. It has no energy, although it has the potential for all the energy. It has infinite organizing power, which means it can organize an infinity of space-time events all at once, because if the universe disappears and then reappears every microsecond, then something has to organize it. Now, how does it get reconstructed after it's destroyed every microsecond? And not only is it reconstructed, it's reconstructed in a slightly improved fashion. And once in a while, it takes a quantum leap of creativity and it shows up as something completely new. It's unbounded, which means there are no boundaries to it. It exists outside of space-time. It's immeasurable, can't be measured. It's eternal. And while it is silent, it's also dynamic at the same time. And it's our own self. Our own self has three levels. A personal level, which is our personal karma, memory, desire. A collective level, which is our spiritual inheritance, in a sense part of the Akashic field, which contains the experiences, the memories, the imagination, the inspiration, the creativity of our ancestors, both human and animal, who have learned to navigate the universe and pass it on. And then it has a universal domain, which is the mystery that some people refer to as God, which is the immeasurable potential of all that was, all that is, all that will ever be. So that universal domain, interacting with its own self, presents itself as myths, archetypes, symbols, gods, goddesses, which then filter through personal karma, memory, and desire, project as the individual intellect, mind, and ego, which is the subtle body, which then expresses itself as prana, which is the energy of the body, which then becomes the molecules of the body, and through that we experience the whole universe, which is our own construct. Curving back within ourselves, we create the whole thing. Now, I'll quickly go over this because this is a difference between the old way of thinking or the old paradigm and the new paradigm. The old paradigm was based on a series of beliefs and assumptions which reinforce our common sensory experience. But we now know that we cannot trust our senses. Our senses, as I said yesterday, do not give us an accurate picture of the world. So anything that is based only on our sensory experience is unreliable. The new paradigm is built on insights from both physics and neuroscience, but also the cognitions of Vedic seers who were rishis in ancient times who actually made a science of consciousness. And they said just like you can explore the outside world through a specific scientific methodology, so you can explore the inside world. And as a result, they came to new conclusions. The old paradigm, which is based on sensory experience, says mind and matter are different, independent entities. The new one says that mind and matter are really the same. The field, when we say the field of consciousness, when it is experienced subjectively, it's the mind. And when the same field is experienced objectively, it's the world of material objects. So there's no difference between what's happening in your mind and what's happening outside. The thoughts, your feelings, emotions, desires, instincts, drives, imagination, inspiration, emotions, moods, feelings, desires, memories, all this is energy and information happening inside. And the same energy and information is showing up as the world outside. There's no difference. It's the same field. And the field is consciousness. The old paradigm says that the world is independent of the perceiver. But the new paradigm, and this is very totally science, John Wheeler says, we live in a participatory universe. Our attention creates and modifies the objects of awareness. Is this a particle? Is this a wave? Before you ask the question, it's neither. It's a potential for particles and waves. But then if you ask the particle-like question, it shows up like a particle. If you ask a wave-like question, it shows up as a wave. Which is it? Well, it's your attention and interpretation that determines the behavior. In the ultimate analysis, the questions we ask the universe, which means the questions we ask ourselves, determine the behavior of the universe. So we say this is a participatory universe. We participate in its creation. The old paradigm says the world of material objects, which includes human beings, is made of clumps of matter separated from each other in space-time. Because my perception says you're there, I'm here, we're separated in space-time. The new paradigm says that's only an appearance. It's not the reality. The world is non-material, composed of energy fields which come from one unmanifest field. And in Vedanta, that one unmanifest field is referred to as Brahman. And space-time events are expressions of this field. Okay. The old paradigm said that human beings are self-contained. We're all independent. But the new one says human beings are focal points in one unified field. Unified means everything, space-time, energy, information, and matter are all part of the field. And that we are inseparably connected with the patterns of intelligence in the whole cosmos. We are all a web of relationships. And there's one shloka in Sanskrit which expresses this very beautifully. Yatha pinde tatha brahmande. If you translate that into English, somewhat translation is, as is the atom, so is the universe. As is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. As is the human body, so is the cosmic body. As is the human mind, so is the cosmic mind. So if something is inside here, it's everywhere. If it's not here, it's nowhere. Anywhere in the universe. You, by going inside, can have access to all the knowledge in the whole universe, which is similar to what Sufis have said. So Rumi, in one of his poems, says, the whole universe exists inside you, ask all from yourself. The whole universe exists inside you, ask all from yourself. Okay, so based on that now, we're going to ask some very deep questions. And I think before we get into this discussion, how to know God, I think there's one simple principle that answers this question. God is as we are. Okay? God is our highest instinct to know ourselves. And the world is as we are. God is as we are. And depending on our state of consciousness, we experience the world in a certain way. We experience God in a certain way. I remember a long time ago, I was attending a conference that was being given by Krishnamurti. And after Krishnamurti finished his discussion, there was a Hindu fundamentalist who was sitting in the front. And he said to Krishnamurti, he said, the more I listen to you, the more I think you must be an atheist. Krishnamurti thought for a moment. He said, I used to be an atheist till I realized I was God. So, to which, of course, the fellow was very upset. And, are you denying the divinity of Krishna? And in the West, you would say, are you denying the divinity of Jesus Christ? And Krishnamurti raised his hands. He said, heavens, I have never denied anybody their divinity. Okay, so what is this mystery that we call God, that our soul is going through this journey through physical domains, through quantum domains, and ultimately through the non-local? And yesterday, I kind of summarized this, that when we go to the quantum domain, these are the qualities. No objects, no space, no time, only possibilities. Non-local communication. Everything connects with everything simultaneously. Quantum leaps of creativity. Proliferation of uncertainty. Observer effect. Anytime we encounter the world, our nervous system behaves in one of 7 ways. And only one of 7 ways. So we've heard of 7 chakras, probably 7 states of consciousness. And it's really amazing that by and large of these 7 ways, we react to the world in only 2 ways. So even though we have 7 ways of encountering the universe, by and large, 99.99% of humanity encounters the world only in one of 2 ways. So if you can go just a little bit beyond the first 2 ways, you're suddenly exploring new territory. Okay. The first way that human beings negotiate with the world is through what, and I've taken the 7 chakras, I've tried to explain it more in biological terms because I like to do that. There's no special reason. Right? The first way that we negotiate with the world is through what is called the fight-flight response. It's built into our nervous system. And our nervous system has, there's part of our brain which is called the reptilian brain, which is about 300 million years old in evolutionary time. Human beings have existed on the planet only for about 60 to 70,000 years as Homo sapiens. Homo sapien means rational thinking beings, but we're not really rational thinking beings. We pretend to be rational thinking beings. So if you go next to a reptile and you make a sudden noise, you make a sudden movement, the reptile will attack you, or if you're close by, it'll attack you, or if you're not so close, it'll slither away. And that's called the fight-flight response. In modern times, it's also referred to as the stress response. That when people feel threatened, they will either fight or they'll run. Okay. This part of the brain is called the limbic brain, and also the reptilian brain. They kind of merge into each other. Very old parts of the brain. When I was in medical school, the way we remembered the functions of the limbic and reptilian brain were the 4 Fs: feeding, fighting, fleeing, and reproduction. Yeah. And most of the time, we are reacting to the world in those four ways. Okay? Now, at what time in our evolutionary history that was useful? Because, there's a tiger around and he wants to eat you for breakfast, then you better kill the tiger or get out of the way, run. But today, that situation is not there for the most part. So we react like this when we're in traffic jams, when people criticize us, or, when somebody says something mean to you, you want to run or you fight from the situation. So this is also known as the stress response, because even though you're not fighting and you're not running, your body behaves as if you were. So your heart rate speeds up, your blood pressure goes up, your cortisol level goes up, adrenaline goes up, and it starts to destroy your system. It's responsible for all the major epidemics of our time, from heart disease to cardiovascular illness to strokes to cancer to infection. If you ask scientists, what's the basis of that? They'll say stress, fight, flight. The first way that human beings react to what they perceive as a threatening situation. The threat could be a physical threat or an emotional threat or psychological threat. This is the most primitive way of responding. I'll also say first chakra, biologically. The second way that human beings respond is a little more sophisticated. They don't fight, they don't run, but they try and control the situation through an emotional, melodramatic means. And they do that either by being extremely sweet and polite, but manipulative, or by through confrontation and intimidation and manipulative, or through stubbornness, indifference, and withdrawal, also another way of manipulating, or by playing the victim. So you can say there are four types of control dramas: nice, nasty, indifferent, and poor me. And we learn these control dramas when we are about 3 years of age. So let's imagine a scene. You're 3 years of age and you're out at the shopping mall with your mother, and you ask her to buy you a lollipop. And your mother says, well, I bought you one yesterday, so I don't think I'm going to buy you another one today. It's not good for your health or teeth or whatever. So what's the first thing you do? You say, Mommy, please, I love you. Happy days. So she said, no, I bought you a lollipop yesterday. So the first one hasn't worked. So what do? You try the second one. You lie down on the ground and you throw a tantrum. You start to scream. And the second one, intimidation and confrontation. She says no. So now when you come home, she can't find you. And you're hiding somewhere in the closet. And she says, where are you? You say, I don't want to talk to you. Leave me alone. We play the third one. She still doesn't succumb. And afterwards, an hour or so later, you play the fourth one. You say, you really love my brothers and sisters, but you don't care about me. And by now, she's so fed up, she buys you a lollipop. And so your little 3-year-old brain says, it works. And by the time we're about 8 years, we've perfected this. Once in a while, when it doesn't work, we take a detour, an escape route, and we call it addiction. Addiction is the inability to be successful in getting our needs met through these control dramas. And the addiction can be to adrenaline, to outcome, to perfection, to drama, to cynical interpretation, what can go wrong, to drugs, to food, to sex, to work, etc. So unfortunately, these control dramas are not very effective by the time we're 30 for two reasons. Number one, we're not so cute as we were at 3. And number two, other people are also playing the same control dramas. So unfortunately, this is 99.99% of human behavior. At this moment, if you look at our president, when you say that he's either playing the first or the second most of the time. Okay. Presidents of countries and multinational corporations our 8-year-old emotionally dwarfed, unfortunately, usually male. Okay. But these control hours are, think of the last time you had a conflict with anyone. Okay. Either you wanted to run or you wanted to fight, or you were extremely nice or manipulative, or you were angry, or you were stubborn, indifferent, or you played the victim. Somebody did it to you. So this is the first two ways in which we negotiate with the world that we encounter in everyday life. And as I said, this is 99.9% of human behavior. Even amongst a lot of people who are otherwise spiritually aspirate, they don't know how to go beyond these first two responses. Part of the reason is that these two responses are built into our nervous system and they're ancient. They go back many million years, hundreds of million years, and they are survival traits. This is how we survived. This is survival of the fittest. But as some great people, including Jonas Salk, have said, the future does not belong to survival of the fittest. If we have a future, it's survival of the wisest. Wisdom will become the new criterion for evolution. And what is wisdom? Wisdom is going beyond this and understanding consciousness, and also understanding how consciousness evolves. What's the future? Because some people have indeed gone beyond this. The third response that we all have built into our nervous system is, for lack of a better word, I'm calling it restful awareness. Krishnamurti called it choiceless awareness. It's the ability to be in touch with the observer inside you in the midst of the observation. The observation is always time-bound, but you, the observer, is timeless. So we can also say that the restful awareness response is being aware of your soul. So yesterday when I said, as you're listening to me, be aware of who's listening, you can do that anytime. I say, as you're listening to me, just become aware of who's listening. And you'll feel a still presence. And the more you feel that still presence, the more you get in touch with it, the more you'll have what is called Shakti. Shakti is that power that comes from your soul. And Shakti is also referred to as the feminine aspect of spirit. And when you have that Shakti, it's called Chitta Shakti. Chitta is consciousness. So the Shakti that comes from just being aware of the still presence, the ever-present witnessing awareness that already exists all the time. To turn your attention from the observation to the observer is to have Chitta Shakti. Inner calm, and it manifests by and by as inner calm in the midst of danger, inner silence in the midst of turbulence, inner peace in the midst of chaos, right? Inner being centered, but also alert at the same time, stillness and dynamic action at the same time. You can also nurture this Shakti, make this strong through the process of meditation. Because every time you go through meditation, as we did yesterday, japa, you repeat a sacred name. And by what happens is that the thoughts and the mantra, if you will, they interfere with each other. And then a point comes and there's no mantra, no thought, complete stillness. And as you nurture this, then this starts to be a permanent part of you. So it's there all the time. Now, I'll talk later how this pertains to different states of consciousness or different planes of consciousness as the expression goes. So this is the fourth response. We can also call it restful awareness or just being in touch with our soul. The fifth response is referred to as intuitive response. What is intuition? And I'll take you through this at the end of today's discussion. I'll take you through intuitive response. Intuition is a form of intelligence which is beyond the rational mind. It is a form of intelligence that is contextual, which means it takes all the context into account. It's relational, all the relationships into account. So it's contextual, it's relational, it's holistic. It does not have a win-lose orientation. It goes beyond cause-effect relationships. And if you really want to know what intuition is, it's eavesdropping on the mind of God. That's what intuition is. It's the ability to ask a question of your own self. Remember, the whole universe exists inside us. And we don't have to ask anybody any question. It's the ability to ask a question and go into your own stillness. And then your soul, which is connected to the universal mind, it brings forth the answer, not maybe immediately, but at some point. You all had the experience, I'm sure, where you're trying to remember somebody's name. And you're struggling, and you're struggling, and you finally give up. And then about 5 hours later, you're doing something else. And you're not even thinking of that, and suddenly it shows up in your consciousness. Well, what happened is when you struggled, then you squeeze out the gap between thoughts. So it's very, it's not letting you go in. It's not letting you go into the discontinuity. But at some point, you stop struggling because you're just tired. Out of sheer fatigue, you stop struggling. Your mind relaxes. Your question goes into the discontinuity. And now it goes into the Akashic field and it does a file search while you are maybe doing something else, washing dishes, seeing a movie or whatever. But the file search is going on in the Akashic field. And then at a certain point, it finds the file and gives it to you. Now, here's the secret. You can access any information in the universe by doing the same thing. By asking a question and going into stillness and then letting go. That's the secret. And then not being attached to the outcome, because that file might take a while to search. It may be your personal file. It may be the collective file of it might be an archetypal file. It might be in the universal domain. But you ask a question, go into stillness, you'll get it. Okay? The whole universe exists inside you. Ask all from yourself. We'll practice this. In Vedic tradition, this is also called Ichha Shakti. Ichha is the Hindi word for desire or intention. So the Shakti of intention, which, in English you can get called spontaneous fulfillment of desire. You're thinking of someone, they call you on the phone. You have a desire for chocolate ice cream, somebody drops by and says, I've brought you some chocolate ice cream. So you start to notice synchronicities of coincidences that in some way or another are a response to your own desires or intentions. It's also called Kriya Shakti. Kriya Shakti means spontaneous right action, the right response to every situation as it occurs, not through planning, not through anticipation, but you're just flowing with the rhythms of the universe. And you just do the right thing as things happen. That's called Kriya Shakti. Gyan Shakti is the Shakti of knowingness, of synchronicity. Synchronicity. Chronos means time. Synchronos means everything synchronized in time. And where does that synchronicity come? It comes from the non-local correlation of the discontinuity, where everything is correlated with everything else. So this is the fifth response that we all have. The sixth response that we all have is the creative response, which means we have the ability to create something that never existed before. We have the ability to manifest something that never existed before. The universe is doing that all the time. It does take leaps of creativity into what are called emergent properties. But when we participate in that creativity, whether it's the creation of a new song or the creation of a new story or the creation of a new melody or symphony or scientific insight or the actual physical manifestation of something. This occurs when we are completely free of the past. In the Shiva Sutras again, there's the phrase, I use memories, but I do not allow memories to use me. When, of course, you have to use memories, otherwise you won't find your place where to go home. But when you're not victimized by your memories, when you have the ability to relinquish the known, what's called freedom from the past, when you have the full awakening of your tanmatras are the refined senses. So yesterday I took you through those. When I say close your eyes, hear sounds, look at, images. When you have the ability to, in your consciousness, hear, see, touch, taste, and smell, you refine that. When you embrace uncertainty, paradox, and ambiguity, because in the absence of uncertainty, there's no creativity. You're certain about everything, where's the creativity? There's nothing to know. So that's a quality of your soul, to embrace uncertainty, paradox, and ambiguity. When you have the ability to see the universal in the particular, and the particular in the universal. I'll talk about that more later when we talk about planes of consciousness. And when you become aware of the karmic connections, which means the relationships behind the events that are orchestrating the creative response. Because every relationship we have is karmic. Every relationship, especially if it's emotional, then it's very karmic, which means emotional could be, it's a relationship that you think are healthy or a relationship that you think is extremely unhealthy. They're both karmic. And if you can understand the karmic background behind that, you can move toward a higher level of consciousness. And when people create, they spontaneously go through these 9 stages. They have a certain vision, they gather information, they analyze the information, they get fatigued, they go into incubation, which means they have the ability to let go, they navigate in the discontinuity, and they suddenly have an insight. The insight is a creative leap in their imagination. They get inspired, then they try it out, they integrate it, they incarnate into a new experience. The most creative act that we are capable of is physical death, because physical death means taking the same karmic software, incubating non-locally, and then taking it and remixing the same karmic software, karma memory design, taking a quantum leap, which is called incarnation or reincarnation. So you take the same karmic leaps, but you create new contexts, new meanings, new relationships, new stories. That's the 5th response that we have. The 6th response is called the visionary response or the archetypal response. It's the ability to see several event lines simultaneously, predict the future based on choices in the moment. It's the ability to have prophecy. It's a shift in cognitive and perceptual mechanisms, which means everything inside you shifts so you can perceive and see things that you weren't able to see before. It's an awakening of dormant potential and the wisdom to use them. In Sanskrit, they're called siddhis and riddhis. So siddhis are superhuman abilities in the material world. Things like precognition, telepathy, seeing into the past, having experiences of other lifetimes. And riddhi is control over the elements of nature and events. So somewhere here, did I see a statue of Ganesh? Is there a statue here? There's one. Is it heavy? Can we bring it here? Yeah. Yeah, let's bring a biggest day. Okay, let me know.
Okay.
So I might be suggesting to you over here, I might be suggesting to you something that is slightly, maybe, more in line with the kind of explanation I'm giving you of consciousness. So when we look at deities, okay, this is the deity Ganesh, okay? Ganesh is a symbolic expression of a higher plane of consciousness. As is Hanuman, a symbolic expression of a higher plane of consciousness. As are the gods and goddesses like Saraswati, Lakshmi, Durga. So, although one can think of these deities as deities outside, which is one way of looking at them, another way of looking at them is that each of these deities symbolize a higher level of consciousness to which we have access. And when we incarnate that state of consciousness through us, then we become capable of extraordinary things, which we were not able to be capable of in our ordinary state of consciousness. So Hanuman, which is, the favorite deity in the Ramdas world, Hanuman is a symbolic expression of many things: simplicity, humility, service, love, karma yoga, dedication, all the things that are symbolized in that figure. And when you become capable of those qualities, then you express those qualities too. And if you can express those qualities, then you become capable of extraordinary things. So Ganesh is a very favorite one because, every aspect, though, you don't see anybody like that in the ordinary human world. So what is Ganesh trying to tell us? First of all, just look, he has a huge head. That is because he's a deep thinker. He's always going inward. He's contemplative. He goes to the deep mysteries of his own soul by going inward. Usually, you see on his forehead three lines of the three ashes. Okay, those three lines, the three ashes, are symbolic of him being independent or beyond the three gunas: sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattva is the creative impulse. Tamas is the impulse of inertia. Rajas is the tension between the two. He goes beyond that. He has huge flapping ears because he's the best listener in the world. He listens with his heart, with his soul, and with his ears. He has the trunk of an elephant, and the trunk of an elephant is symbolic of two things. First, it's very powerful. It can uproot a tree. But it's also very discerning, discriminating. It can pick up a needle in a haystack. So even though he has immense power, he uses it very discriminatively. He has a huge belly because he can digest any problem in the world. Everybody's. He has one tusk that is broken, one tusk that is whole, because he's independent of the pairs of opposites. He has 4 hands. So in this particular one, in one he has a rope because he's always aspiring to climb the tree of knowledge. In one he has an axe because he's always destroying ignorance. In one he has the fruit of knowledge. And in one sometimes he has the book of the Vedas. Usually you'll see 1 foot in the ground, 1 foot in the air. So he's local and non-local at the same time, which means he's immanent and transcendent at the same time. He's in this world, he's not of it. And therefore he's always abiding in the field of consciousness as well as active in the field of dynamism. He's silent and dynamic at the same time. Sometimes he has a rope, a stake around his belly, like a belt, which is symbolic of his subduing his ego. And sometimes he has a little rat over here, which reminds him that greed is always a temptation. And usually he has 2 women by his side. So one's the goddess Riddhi, and the other is the goddess Siddhi, superhuman abilities in the material world. And Riddhi, control over the elements of nature and events. So what is Ganesh saying? Ganesh is saying, don't worship me. In Vedic rituals, you don't worship these gods. You invoke them. There's a difference between worship and invocation. invocation means you actually incarnate the energy and the information and the consciousness of the higher self that is embodied in that symbolic expression of your higher self. So when you invoke Ganesh in your consciousness, then you have all these qualities of consciousness. Of course, you would have superhuman abilities in the material world. So every god and every goddess expresses different qualities. Mahalakshmi, the goddess of wealth, if you invoke her qualities, then she manifests through you and you manifest wealth. Saraswati, if you invoke her qualities and you incarnate them through you, then you manifest wisdom, etc., etc. Hanuman, service, dedication, loyalty, love, etc. So try not to think of these as deities, but as symbolic expressions of your higher self. And try not to think that we have to worship them as much as we have to invoke them. Invocation is the expression of your archetypal higher self into very practical manifestations. Because once you start to invoke these energies or states of consciousness within you, you become capable of doing things that you would never be capable of as an ordinary human being. Because you're literally incarnating these higher expressions of your own self into space-time with causality. So one practice, by the way, which is really good and which works through experience, is you choose 2 or 3 of these deities, fully understand them, fully understand their qualities, and once you've done that, have them with you, and when you open your eyes after your meditation, do the japa meditation, then look at these deities and just mentally ask themselves to incarnate through you. Then leave it alone. Okay? So, you do your meditation, understand what Ganesh really represents in consciousness, and at the end of the meditation, when you open your eyes, tell Ganesh, I invite you to incarnate through me. Incarnate as energy, as information, as state of consciousness. And then leave it. And you'll see suddenly, synchronistically, coincidentally, extraordinary things will start to happen to you. Because you're not doing it. God is doing it for you through a very symbolic expression of God's energy. That's what we call the visionary response. It's the 6th response. And it's a higher guidance response. When you start to express this level of being, then you become a mythical being yourself. You have absence of selfish motivation. You start to slowly represent the highest aspirations of the collective soul and the collective spiritual inheritance. You have a shift in cognitive and perceptual mechanisms. You have the ability to see several event lines in the future based on choices in the present. I mentioned that the word Maya is related to this mythical response. And myths are basically stories that are primordial, that are part of our collective spiritual inheritance. They are part of our collective karma, collective yearning. They have resonant thoughts, simple stories, and compelling characters. So if you're familiar with Mahabharata or Ramayana or all the great myths in the Old Testament, then you'll see these stories are very primordial and they represent archetypes. Archetypes are symbolic expressions of higher states of consciousness that trigger events through you through synchronicity. Now, this is a little detail and we won't go too much into this, but understand that nothing is truer than a myth. Joseph Campbell would say, you don't rely on history because history is just journalism and journalists are not reliable. Okay? But do rely on mythology because mythology represents the highest spiritual aspirations of human beings when they tap into higher states of consciousness. They symbolically represent them in these states, but actually what they're telling you is you are capable of extraordinary things. And in modern times, we create heroes and heroines in our society that are basically encapsulated mythologies, whether they're political figures or celebrities. And I'll skip all this right now because this is for business school. I prepared this slide. But what I told businesses, when I teach business schools, I tell them, you want to create a good business, you have to sell a myth, which means you have to sell a story. And people will buy your product or your service thinking they're buying your product or your service, but they're not buying your product or your service, they're buying your story. And so here we are. These are modern myths. And Marlboro cigarettes, people are going to be ending up in respirators 20 years from now, but they'll still buy the myth. Okay? So there's nothing more. This is anthropologists call this ritual action. People will buy a product and engage in action to consume the myth. Whether they're suicide bombers, whether they're serving the downtrodden with missionary zeal, marching for peace in times of war, sparking revolutions and movements, ecology, all these are the modern myths that we're creating. And if we didn't, we would be spiritually bankrupt. When society loses its mythology, then it has to invent something. Star Wars, Princess Leia, Luke Skywalker. But, the real myths are the spiritual myths that aspire us, give us, the motivation and the inspiration to do extraordinary things and invoke these gods and goddesses by incarnating within us. Okay, and true visionaries like Mahatma Gandhi, for example, or Martin Luther King, they totally understood the visionary response, and they expressed it, and they also understood the role of critical mass of consciousness, which I'll talk to you about later. And finally, the seventh response is called the sacred response, which is even beyond the archetypal visionary response. It's when you completely transform your personal self and merge with the universal self. It's the state of being spontaneously in love. It's also called Ananda Shakti. Transformation of personal self to the universal self. Seeing the whole universe in one's being. This is chapter 10, 11, and 12 of Bhagavad Gita as well. When you go through that, you'll see it's when Lord Krishna expresses himself as the universal being, where there's complete loss of fear of death and the experiential knowledge of the immortality of existence. These are the stages through which our consciousness evolves. And as our consciousness evolves through these stages, it expresses itself differently. So cognition, which means our knowingness changes, perception changes, behavior changes, social interactions change, relationships change, environment change, even the forces of nature change, because the forces of nature outside are not the same as the forces of nature inside. They're not different. And it's the same consciousness that is expressing itself inside as well as outside. There's an interdependent co-arising of events. So reality is different in different states of consciousness. Knowledge is different in different states of consciousness. Biology is different in different states of consciousness. Environment, relationships, and even nature. This is a short map. And when we understand the map, then we can ask some more questions. The first question we ask is, who is God? And I think we started this session by saying God is as we are. So if we are scared in the fight-flight response, then what do we most desire? We desire somebody that will protect us. And so God becomes the protector when we are in the fight-flight response. And we have portrayed this God in religious texts, in the book of Manu and the Old Testament, and many other religious texts. We have depicted this God as vengeful, capricious, quick to anger, jealous, unfathomable, a God that's judgmental, God that rewards, God that says, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Your God is a jealous God. You're familiar with those phrases, right? Okay, so that's the God of the fight, flight response, God being as we are. The second God that we experience in all the religions of the world is God the Almighty. So we are now in the reactive response. We're manipulators. We have learned to manipulate people, situations, and things. So, of course, our experience of God, if we are control freaks, so God must be the ultimate control freak. God is sovereign, omnipotent, just, the answer of prayers, rational, impartial, organized into rules, 10 commandments, thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. It's all about thou shalt not. Okay. So this is the second stage that we experience. Are these gods real? Yeah, as real as this room, right? This room is also a projection. So they're as real as the person who's invoking these gods. Third God. This God shows up in Western traditions as Jesus Christ, the God of peace. God offers the peace that passes understanding, the restful awareness response, and shows up in Eastern religions as Mahavir, as Buddha, as many others. Detached, calm, offering consolation, silent, meditative, conciliatory, undemanding. That's because we are there. Okay, we are feeling peaceful. This is the God we want and desire. As we go deeper now into our own understanding of our own selves, into the intuitive response, remember the intuitive response is contextual, relational, holistic, nurturing, does not have a win-lose orientation, eavesdrops on the mind of God, which understands everything. So God becomes the redeemer for us, will redeem us into more understanding, is tolerant, forgiving, non-judgmental, inclusive, accepting. But there's still some more evolution here. As we go into the creative response, then we start to experience God as unlimited creative potential, abundant, affluent, one that has control over space-time, open, willing to be known, inspired, generous. But then we go where we are invoking symbolically the gods and goddesses in our own consciousness, the visionary response. Now we experience a God that is transformative, mystical, enlightened, beyond all causes, healing, magical, alchemist. If you look at any religious text, by the way, you'll see all the 7 levels of God. See this 35 miracles in the New Testament itself, right? And finally, if we go beyond all of that into the sacred response, then God is just, I am. When Abraham asked God, he says, who are you? God says, I am that I am. Or Christ says, before Abraham was, I am. In Vedanta, we say, Aham Brahmasmi, I am the universe. I am. Unborn, undying, infinite, intangible, unchanging, unmoving, unmanifest, immeasurable, invisible, but not unreal. In fact, the most real. Because without this, all the others are just mere projections, even the God of miracles in their projections. This is the one that is not a projection, without which no projection. So this is the 7th chakra, enlightened awareness, whatever. So what kind of world did God create? Now here's a simple principle. The world is as we are, right? The world is as we are. It's in every moment a mirror of our projection of what's happening inside ourselves. Now we also know, simple principle, that birds of a feather hang together. So if you're in the fight-flight response, who do you hang out with? others who are also in the fight flight response. If you are in the meditative seeking response, who do you hang out with? You're hanging out with similar people right here, right? So whatever state of consciousness we're in, we project a certain world, and then we hang out with people who are also projecting the same world. And you said, God created this world. And so in the fight flight response, the world is one of basic survival. In the reactive response, which is the ego response, the world is of competition and ambition. We just find ourselves in that world. We say, God made this world. In the restful awareness response, we end up in an ashram, inner solitude, self-sufficiency. In the intuitive response, we start to grow from that inner silence, the world of insight and personal growth. In the creative response, we start to actually create new things, art, invention, discovery. In the visionary response, we enter the world of prophets and seers. And in the sacred response, the transcendent world of infinite possibilities. Who am I? So as our consciousness is evolving, the world is changing for us. God is also a different expression. My sense of who am I is also changing. And in the first stage, I'm a survivor. I'm a physical body. I'm a physical environment. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. When you're talking about the seven stages, from personal experience, I know that if you do a lot of spiritual practice and do like meditation, you can get further up the ladder. But what is your experience about, like, going up from stage 1 to 5? Like, what we suggest?
Each stage is included and transcended, which means you might still once in a while resort to stage 1, if your life is being threatened. So it's there. You have the ability, but you hardly ever use it. It's not part of your experience. It's like, imagine a series of sieves. You know what sieves are? And sieves, they're filters, with little holes in them. Am I pronouncing it correct? Sieves. You have a series of sieves, and you go to the beach and you pick a lot of sand and grit and pebbles. And these series of sieves have holes in them that are progressively finer and finer. So the big pebbles will be left behind, and the finer grains will be able to go all the way through, but they can also go back and forth. Second stage, my identity is my ego, my personality. Third stage, my identity shifts. Behind my ego is the silent witnessing awareness, which we all experience now, right? The fourth stage, my identity says, there's a silent witnessing awareness, but it also knows everything because it can ask a question and eavesdrop on the mind of God. Fifth stage, that same silent witness whose knower says, I can co-create with God anything. In fact, God would remain unmanifest if I didn't participate. The sixth stage is enlightened awareness, which means, at this time you're expressing yourself either as Hanuman or Lakshmi or Ganesh or many of the symbolic expressions of higher states of consciousness, one or many. But it is, we can have these incarnate through us. And this seventh stage is you become the source. How do you fit in? So first stage you ask somebody, how are you doing? Says, coping. Okay. Second stage, asked our president, so how are you doing? We're winning. Winning becomes the most important thing. Third stage, you start to say, it's not that important as long as I can say stand to it. Fourth stage, you say, I'm beginning to understand because you can see the context and relationships. Fifth stage, I'm beginning to create. Sixth stage, I'm becoming an expression of love. Not love as a sentiment or emotion, but the love that God expresses through creation. seventh stage, I am. How do I find God? Well, in the first stage, through fear-loving devotion. And you do have the experience of God when you experience that, but God the protector. In the second stage, through awe and obedience, you follow the 10 commandments. In the third stage, through meditation, contemplation. In the fourth stage, self-acceptance, you realize that your soul actually is a place of ambiguity. There would be no creation if there was no opposing energies. So at the first stage, you accept yourself, which means you also embrace your own shadows. You know, we have a shadow self, all of us, which is relatively diabolical. You know, we have a sacred self, we have a profane self, we have a shadow self, we have a light self, we have divine, diabolical, sacred, profane, unconditional love, forbidden lust.